Huh? You can hear it? Okay.
If you use a different voice.
I'm going to go home. Harold's going to teach his class.
A little too much bass.
Huh?
A little too much bass.
Too much bass? Dooby dooby doo. Morning. Boy. Well, as we get going, I hope everybody had a good holiday weekend. And, we took off last Tuesday, went to Alabama. And by the time I got to Alabama, the third round of this sinus stuff hit. And so I was there, oh goodness, I had to go to emergency care finally. And they gave me a shot and some medicine and stuff like that. Hopefully, knock on wood, I'm getting over this stuff. But 3 rounds of this sinus stuff, my head felt like it was going to explode. But anyhow, the only thing I know of, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this morning. As you know, Houston has been struggling with all kinds of alcohol addiction and drugs and things like that. He came back and he was spiraling out of control. And everybody was concerned about him, trying to figure out. He'd shut everybody off, wouldn't answer the door if you went over there, wouldn't call. He was texting weird stuff on Facebook and everything else. Like he and his brother were being held hostage and stuff like this. So that was all day Friday. And we've tried to get him some help and everything else, and there's nothing that we could do. We couldn't get him. But the people at the Christian counseling thing in Tennessee, where he was before, they saw what was going on with Houston. They packed up yesterday morning. The director and one of Houston's counselor friends, they packed up yesterday morning, came down here and picked Houston up, and he's probably in Tennessee by now. He went back. And so that's going to be a good thing for him, because he will be in there, hopefully get straightened out. But, alcohol and drugs will mess up your brain. And that's what was happening to the poor kid. And he's got a heart the size of Texas. I mean, compassionate, always thinking about other people and things like that, but he's fighting demons. And so y'all keep him in your prayers, if you will. Everybody else seems to be doing fine in the family. How about Miss Millie? Good to see you up and about. And she had a round with her blood pressure and her ticker and pneumonia and all this other stuff. And she's getting around better than I am this morning. It's good to see you, Millie. And I don't know of anything else. Do y'all? Anybody have anything?
Allergies like you.
Ma'am?
Allergies like you.
Allergies? Okay, bless your heart. Well, nothing else. Let's go ahead and have a quickie prayer. We're going to have probably a short lesson this morning, because I couldn't do everything this week on up with that laptop computer that doesn't work. Okay, so anyway, let's pray. Holy Father, we're so grateful that we can come to you in our times of need, and our times of joy, and our times of just reaching out to you. We ask you, Father, to be with us this morning as we study your book of Isaiah, and help us understand that we're not talking about the nations around us. We're talking about your people, your kingdom, and the things that you've done throughout history with your people. You continue to do and continue to expect more from your children. We ask you to open our minds and open our hearts, Father, to help us to reflect your glory in this world around us. We thank you for all those that you've been with here in this congregation who are struggling with their illnesses. And we just ask you to lift them up as we lift them up to you. And you take care of them as only you can. This is our prayer in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. All right. I guess. Isaiah, the 6th chapter. Walter has been waiting to get here. He was here last week. And, and I said, no, Walter, we got chapter 5 before 6. And so y'all just kind of encourage him. to everything else, kind of a summary of everything that's going on in Judah from start to finish. Even brought it up to judgment. But now we're looking at kind of the beginning of this. And so we call this vision of holiness in verses 1 through 4. And what Isaiah does here, he starts off, and we talked about this before. Somebody asked about how they went to dating things here. I think it was Walter or somebody here not long ago. How did they date things back then? Because we didn't have, BC and AD and all of that. How did they do it? Well, they did it by an event. And that's the way he dates this. It was the year that King Uzziah died that Isaiah saw this vision. Now, back up just a second, because we're going to look at Uzziah and see what was happening with him. Because in Judah at that time, a lot of things going on, and it was uncertainty. They didn't know what was going to happen. Kind of like in the United States today. I saw the other day where Putin told his people to arm the southern 3 nuclear weapons and get them ready for battle. And boy, everybody is worried to death what's going on and everything else. Well, that's nationally. A war can happen. Now, we are citizens of the kingdom of God. The world is attacking us. I'm not worried about Putin. God's going to take care of him one way or the other. But we're being attacked by things out in the world that we begin to assimilate with, and generationally, we worry about things that's going on. I know that many of y'all are worried about what's going on here at this congregation. Look, we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 people in the Bible class this morning. And there was a time when we had 50 to 60, sometimes 80, in a Bible class. And we see things going downhill. God is in control of everything. And as long as we are faithful to God and carry out His will, God spares the remnant, all right? We need to remember that. So, uncertainty, fear, that might be what's going through people's minds right now. That's what was happening during this period of time, because Uzziah, which, by the way, his name was Azariah, you'll see him written in both forms there, okay? Later on, you'll hear about Tiglath-Pileser, also known as Pull. All right? So, many times you have the same characters with different names, but they're the same people. But he was a king that lasted a long time in his reign, and it was very prosperous for Judah during his reign. As a matter of fact, 52 years he sat on the throne. Okay? You want to read about that, 2 Chronicles 26 and 2 Kings 15, 1 through 7. You can read all about him and kind of tie this in as to what is happening with Uzziah. But when you look at Uzziah, one of the things that you find is that his kingdom was stable. Picture the 1950s in the States, okay? Picture the 1950s in a congregation, where everything seems to be rocking along and going smooth and everything. That's the way the kingdom was under Uzziah. It was stable. They had money coming in. There was economic growth. They were able to, buy new pews, put down new carpet, all this kind of stuff. This is how Uzziah was. And the military strength grew. He became powerful. He was taking out little communities around him, gained land and prosperity and what have you. So that was going on when he was alive. They expanded their borders, like I said, taking away these things. There was invention. He had a guy like Elon Musk who was going around inventing new weapons of war, new technology, and they learned how to plant their fields and everything to make them more prosperous. And so everything was growing under his reign. However, when he died, leadership fell. Some of you who are almost who is as old as I am, do you remember in your history lessons how the country felt when FDR died? Everybody was going around weeping and everything. In our generation, it's when Kennedy got shot. Everybody, what are we going to do and all this stuff? It leaves this vacuum when one of your potential leaders or prominent leaders dies. And that's what happened here. Now, one of the things we find about Uzziah was that he was a king, but his spirituality started waning off. He was allowing his popularity, his prosperity, his power to sink in and take away from what he should have been, and he became something he shouldn't have been. He was prideful. He became unlawful. Didn't follow the law of Moses. He decided to go into the temple of God and burn incense, which is what the priests were supposed to do. He's a king. He wasn't supposed to do that. But he did it. And when he did that, God struck him with leprosy. All right? 2 Chronicles 26. And when he was struck with leprosy, of course, he went away, and his son Jotham came into power. But this is the year, right after his death, Jotham's coming into power. Assyria, under Tiglath-Pileser, is growing. They're a threatening power now. And he's taking little communities all over the place and what have you. And Tiglath-Pileser, as I said, was a dominant power. And this is before Babylon became super strong, all right? And so what we find here is in this vision of God's holiness that Isaiah sees, he does this in the year that everything is falling apart. The ruling class has gone down. There's war on the outskirts of the city. Coming toward them. All these bad things are happening, and nobody knows what to do. I would imagine Isaiah is just as confused as everybody else. But it says here that in the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. I can only imagine what that was like. You know, his temple fills the heaven, and the seat of his robe fills the temple. Humongous. Well, what a sight to see. But he saw the Lord. He saw Yahweh, and he was seated on his throne. What do we learn from that? Well, we learned that God is still in control. We see that same thought over in the book of Revelation. John, in his vision, where are you, God? Where's God? First time we see him, he's sitting in the throne room ruling the universe. God is in control at all times. This is what Isaiah sees here. It says above him were seraphim. Now, seraphim is plural, meaning more than one. Actually, it's seraph. And the word seraph means fiery one. All right? I don't know what they were, but they're fiery, like the seraph Tanin, which is Isaiah talks about later on. The seraph Tanin is the flying dragon, or the bronze-colored flying dragon, or the fiery flying dragon. So seraphim carry with it the idea of fiery ones. Aim is plural. You have the cherub, who is a guardian. Cherubim is plural. You have El, who is God. You have Elohim, who is our God. All right, you follow what I'm saying? So it's the plural. And so these seraphim have 6 wings. They're covering their eyes, covering their feet, and they're flying around. And they're calling out one to another. And what they're calling out is they're kind of like heaven's cheerleaders. They are designating that the God Almighty, Lord Almighty, is holy, holy, holy. Now in Hebrew, when you repeat something 3 times, that is for emphasis. Holy means separated from. We get words like consecrated or sanctified and what have you. We hear the words, somebody once said, God is holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, holy other. When we think of something that is holy, let's think of something that's separated. Holy Communion. That's not just grape juice and showbread up here, right? That is separated for the purpose of having the Lord's Supper. God is holy other. Our concept of how separated he is from everything else it's limited by human understanding. The seraphim are saying he is totally different than anything you could ever imagine, than anything you could ever comprehend. He is holy, 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 and the whole earth is full of his glory. All right? Not just the heavenly realm. Everything is full of his glory. Now, what's glory? In the Greek, the word is doxa. And what that means is like his presence, his awesomeness is visible. And which is exactly what Paul says in the Roman letter, that what is known about God is seen from the things that he's made. And when we look at the heavens and the cosmos, and just understand that out of all of that, this little speck of grain on the outside of the Milky Way galaxy that has us on it, we're not just some sort of parasite living on a big ball. We are God's creation. And the God who is wholly other, the whole earth is full of his glory, we are here to radiate that glory. And that's what he's getting at here. So, in this vision of God's holiness, we talked about the context here. When Uzziah died, it pointed to the end of human stability. So anytime you get to thinking about things becoming unstable and things of that nature, Isaiah points to God. We should be looking toward God when we think things are falling apart, okay? And God's glory and his majesty, Isaiah brings that up. When things are falling apart, think about God's glory. Think about God's majesty. He's high and exalted, seated on a throne. He is sovereign over all creation. And we need to remember that no matter what goes on in this world, God has his finger on it. God can squelch it or he can use it to his glory any way he wants to. And whatever it might be, it will be for our betterment, one way or the other. Excuse me. And the seraphim, as I said 3 times, are crying out the uniqueness of God. Temple filled with his glory. All these things are happening here. So what Isaiah is trying to get these people to do is reflect on God's holiness. They are the children of Israel. They need to be thinking about their holy God. They need to be thinking about his majesty in this world that's consumed by chaos and instability and all of that. We today, in that same vein, we need to be thinking about God's holiness, God's stability, God's power, God's glory. Don't worry about what's going to happen with Putin and China and everything else. God's in control. Don't worry about what's going to happen in the confines of this little building here full of God's people. God is in control. And we need to remember that. God brings us to where he wants us to be. All right? Now, verse 6 through 5, Isaiah, when he sees this majesty of God and him sitting on the throne, something happens to Isaiah. What's that? Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined. A good man in the presence of holiness is still a sinful man. And he has become acutely aware of his sinfulness. I am ruined. Why? I'm a man of unclean lips. Not just me, but I live among unclean people with unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Sinful man cannot stand in the presence of a holy God. All right? Without becoming aware of his sinfulness. So what happens with Isaiah? When we are looking in the mirror, all right? When we see the man in the mirror, we should be able to recognize our own sinfulness in comparison to Jesus. Paul over in Romans 15 talks about don't be boasting about one another, about who's better. You know, and there was a clash going on in Rome between the Gentiles and the Jews. The Jews says, we got the law. The Gentile says, yeah, but you didn't know what to do with it. And so they're in each other's throats, so to speak. And over in chapter 15, he says, don't be thinking of yourself, one another. He says, because God has given every one of you a measure or a standard to be living by. That standard is Christ. And when you measure yourself against Christ, you're nothing. So don't be thinking about that. That's what we need to understand. We measure ourselves against Christ. We're nothing, but thank God for his mercy. And as we grow, and we are growing day by day, you know, little by little, inch by inch, so to speak, or we should be. And so this is, when we stand in the presence of God, recognize our sinfulness. Don't be too prideful. My sins are different than John's, different than Harold's and Millie's and what have you. But we all have them. And we're all sinners. Forgiven sinners, but we're all sinners, okay? So, Woe to me, I'm ruined. Isaiah has an awareness of sin. He knows what's going on here. When you look at people today, what do you think their attitude is towards sin? In the church and out of the church?
I think it's just part of everyday life, their everyday walk. They don't really consider the outcome of the sin.
Don't really, in other words, in our everyday walk, there are some things that we do that we don't even think about. Yeah. And I think you're right, because what has happened over the years is it's kind of like that generational thing. What my parents wouldn't do back then, I find I'm comfortable with doing things, and maybe I shouldn't be, And what's happened is that over time, what was sin then is no longer a sin in the minds of society. And we can see that right now, what's going on in our world. But it also happens with us. Sometimes Christians have a tendency to compromise and, let's see, how can I say that? We compromise, say, well, it's not really bad. I'm not hurting anybody or something like that. But in reality, are you glorifying God with it? There's where the problem comes in. So we need to take sin seriously, and there's a lot of things that are sin. Gossip is sinful. Homosexuality is sinful. One's not any worse than the other. It's all sin. And so we need to remember these things, okay? Sin in God's holiness. I'm a man of unclean lips. But like I said, he recognized that. It affects not only me, but it affects everybody around me. Okay? When I sin, it's going to affect the people around me. Some way, shape, or form. All right? So, examine ourselves, pay attention to what's going on in our life, and be humble when we approach God. Don't be like the Pharisee. I thank God I'm not like other men are, but beat our chest and say, be merciful unto me, a sinner. So that's another thing. Verse 6 and 7. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hands. Here you go, Walter. Which he had taken with tongs from the altar. Now, it must have been hot because he just didn't pick it up. Used tongs. And with it, he touched my mouth and said, see, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin is atoned for. The imagery here, fire purges the impurities. And so that's what we have here, is a vision of the impurities of his unclean lips being removed. And God does this. It's redemption in a sense. And God redeems Isaiah, but he also redeems mankind through Jesus Christ. So we have the cleansing by God, and that's an act of grace. Did Isaiah do anything to deserve what God had just done for him? Nothing. All he did was see the vision and says, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I'm an unclean man with unclean lips. So when the seraph brings this coal from the altar, notice what he says, your sin is taken away, your sin is atoned for. God does that. It's God's initiative. Isaiah didn't know what to do. God says, I'll take care of the problem. We today don't know what to do. God says, I'll take care of the problem with Jesus. Okay? Still there. When there's sin in my life, go to God. God takes care of the problem. And God provided atonements for him, and that atonement for Isaiah kind of foreshadows Christ. The coal atoned for Isaiah, burning away the filth of his lips, but Christ burns away the filth of our lives. And so it's kind of a foreshadow of what's taking place here. It's a forgiveness that we have through Jesus. And so that's kind of the picture that we have here with Isaiah. Then in verses 6 through 8, we have a call to service. And what I mean by that, remember, this is a time of everything's falling apart. Nobody knows what to do. There's upheaval. Uzziah's dead. Nobody knows what to do, how to do, and everything else. And Isaiah says, I heard a voice of the Lord. Now this is the Lord talking. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? You see, God has a plan. I have no doubt that God could have sent seraphim or cherubs down here and taken care of Tiglath-Pileser. I have no doubt that God could have, just pointed his finger and everything would have been good. All right? But he doesn't do that. God used a mediator, a go-between, between he and his people to communicate what he wanted done. Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? All right? And Isaiah says, I said, here am I, send me. We even have that in our songbooks, don't we? Here am I, send me. There's a message to be delivered. Isaiah recognizes that. Isaiah has concern for his fellow citizens, for his fellow tribal members. He has concern for the people about him. He knows what God is going to be doing, and he says, I am here, give me your message, I will share it with them. And God tells Isaiah, go and tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Huh? Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Do what, Isaiah? Go tell these people these things. Make the heart of these people calloused. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Wait a minute, God, I thought you wanted me to deliver a message of hope. You want me to go out here and tell them something that's going to close their eyes, they'll never see it, they'll never hear it, and they'll get, puffed up? Yep. What are you talking about, Walter?
Isn't that about the same thing he talked about in Romans 1, where he more or less hardened your heart? You do something wrong for so long, he'll just convict you.
He'll give you over, okay? Give them over to a reprobate mind. Do what you want to do. Because he goes on and says, otherwise they might see with their ears, see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand in their hearts. You're going to go preach a message, Isaiah, and when you preach this message, they're not going to hear it. Why? Because their ears are plugged up. They're not going to see it, even though we show them signs. Why? Because they don't want to believe it. They're going to be callous. They're going to plant their feet. Kind of like a fellow by the name of Pharaoh did too, Walter. Over in the book of Exodus, a lot of people say, well, he didn't have a choice. God hardened his Pharaoh's heart. He would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said to Pharaoh. Did God harden it to where he couldn't do anything? No. Pharaoh thought of himself as a god. Who is this Yahweh that I should listen to him? I'm a god too. It's kind of like those of you in here who have children. You know what I'm talking about. They get up a little older, you tell them you're going to do this, and they plant their feet, no, I'm not, It's kind of like when you get into a situation to where what you're telling the person to do, because you care for them, they resent it because it's my life. You can't tell me what to do. See what I'm getting at? That's what we're talking about. Who is Yahweh to tell me what to do? I'm a God too. The people of Israel, who are you, Isaiah, to say this is what God says for us to do? They're going to become callous. They're not going to listen. We saw that in Isaiah. We're going to see that in Isaiah. We saw that all through Jeremiah over and over and over again, that the people just did not want to listen. They wanted to compromise, live their lifestyle, and do what they wanted to do. All right. The question, who am I going to send? Well, that's the invitation for willing participants. All right? If you're willing, go do it. And what God is doing here, He's not seeking perfection. He's seeking availability. Matthew 28, we talk about that all the time. All power is given unto me in heaven and on earth. Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations. Well, actually, as you're going through your life, disciple people. Share that with them. And he's not saying you have to do that perfectly. He's saying that your lifestyle should cause people to wonder what you got, and then you tell them it's Jesus, you know. Simple as that. And so availability is what God has always wanted with his messengers. A willingness, here am I, send me. That was Isaiah's response. Despite the weight of the task, Isaiah knew what he was going to get into. I don't think he knew he's going to get sawed in half there at the end of it, but he knew that it was going to be a pretty heavy task to go on here. So as members of the body of Christ, we need to be able to respond to God's call in our own lives and have that kind of eagerness. Walter, Harold, I know y'all for sure because I've been out with you when you do that. At a restaurant, yeah, there's an order. We're going to get ready to pray. Would you like for us to pray for you? You know, little things like that, and let people know that there are people in here in the world who are godly and who care about other people. You'd be surprised how that will open up a door for you, okay? And then the mission, preach to people who don't understand. Out in the world, I do not know how many Bible studies I've had in my life, all right? I don't know how many times I've sat down and tried to talk to people about Bible and they get mad and, blow up. Had a guy come in here one time for marriage counseling. His wife was here bawling her eyes out. He came in my door in the office, and he looked at me and he says, if I'm here to talk about God, you can forget it. And he turned around and walked off. You know, so you have people that are like that. They don't want to listen. They're going to live their life. But even if we don't have visible results, you're making an impact on the world around you by how you live and what you say, okay? Hope beyond judgment, verse 11 through 13. Always, God gives hope. Isaiah, then I said, for how long, Lord? How long do you want me to do this, all right? And the Lord answered, until the cities lie in ruin without inhabitants, until the houses are left deserted and the fields are ruined and ravaged, until the Lord has set everyone far away and the land is utterly forsaken, and through a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste. And as the terebinth and the oak tree stumps leave where they are cut, oak leaf stumps where they are cut down, so the holy seed will be a stump in the land. Now, as you look at that, you're wondering what's going on here. What he's saying is you're going to preach this all throughout the period. Captivity is going to come, and you're going to talk to everybody all throughout this long period of time. And even though some people are there, the land is going to be laid to waste. Judgment is coming. God foresees that. He knows it's coming. But that last verse, as the terebinth and the oak leave stumps when they are cut down, so the holy seed will be the stump in the land. There's always hope. Something is going to grow back. Here he's calling it the holy seed. So what he's saying is you're going to go preach to people. They're not going to want to listen. They're not going to hear. They're not going to want to obey. But you do it anyway. All right? You go out and do that. Judgment is coming. But Isaiah, you need to understand there's hope beyond that. All right? When you say how long, think about it. Lord, hey, you want me to do this for 2 weeks? Am I going to go on a 3-month mission? What is it? No, you do it until it's over. You don't just pick up the mantle and go for a little while and stop. You do it until it's over. And again, he didn't know he was going to get sawed in half at that time. But anyway, God's going to continue this until purification is complete. Another metaphor would be a vine. You have to prune the vine to make it grow. And sometimes God prunes the vine to get rid of the stubble and the bad fruit to make it grow. Remnant is there. They understand they're part of God's redemptive plan. So as we look at this, God is faithful to his promise. He promised it with Isaiah. He promised it with Jeremiah. He promised it with Hosea. Promised it with Zechariah. Promises it to us today. Upon this rock, the fact that I am the Son of God, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. What he's saying is Hades isn't going to be attacking the church. The church is attacking the realms of death. Hades will fall when the church carries out its mission. And that's what we need to remember with Isaiah. When people carry out God's will, they prosper. Okay? God is holy. Holy other. Never compare God to yourself. When you look at Jesus, you can't compare yourself to him. He never did anything wrong. We can't say that, can we? We sin daily either by omission or commission, one or the other. And God is holy. As a matter of fact, he's holy other. We cannot imagine the sanctity of our God in heaven, all right? The James Webb Telescope, taking all those pictures of the constellations and everything out there in the cosmos, billions of them. Billions of them. They said there's more constellations. And when I say constellations, I'm talking about like the Milky Way. You know, got jillions of stars in it. There are jillions of constellations. And they say there are more constellations out in the cosmos than there are grains of sand on our beaches. That's awe-inspiring. That on this little grain of sand constellation known as the Milky Way, on this little speck of dust, there's another minute little mite named Ken Wright, and God cares about him. That's awesome. And we need to think about God and respond in that awesomeness to God and his majesty. God cares about you. About you. And we need to remember that. Personal sin. I got them, you got them, we all have them. I know mine, you know yours. And we need to examine that sin and realize it's only Jesus who can take that sin away. I can't say, well, I'll start being good and get rid of my sin problem. It doesn't work that way. Jesus is the only one that takes away the sins that we have committed, and he's the only one that gives us the strength to overcome those obstacles in our lives. But we have to be willing and make the effort, okay? God's call. It says challenge to answer God's call with Isaiah's spirit of willingness. There's where we fall short sometimes, unless we're pressed into the situation. Okay? God is calling upon us to not only reach up, but reach out. And when we start reaching out to one another and to others, we're fulfilling God's call for the kingdom portion here in New Iberia. Okay? We need to remember that. All right. Hope. Look around you. Yeah, it's a few people are gone and stuff like that. You ain't dead. As long as people are striving to serve God, there's always hope of redemption. One way, shape, or form. The Judah that came back after the captivity wasn't the same Judah that went into captivity. We need to remember that. Okay? All right. Always includes restoration and hope. That's God. And guess what? That's Isaiah 6. Told you I didn't have time to put all of them on there. But next week, 7. Yeah, Walter?
That holy stuff, is that pertaining to Jesus, or is that pertaining to when he said, I've got 700 out there and 1,000 babies?
I think it would go either way.